Hey YouTube! So before I get started on this video, first just a little like update slash apology slash explanation for why I didn't post last week. So like I got everything ready to go and scheduled for the 2 weeks when I was in Seattle, and then I had planned, my flight got back on Saturday, so I thought that it would be fine to record videos on Sunday and post last week, but I actually ended up getting really sick while I was in Seattle and spent a majority of my time there, which kind of sucked, being sick. And so I was both too tired and my throat hurt too much to really record videos for last week. So sorry about the little break. But I am back, and I wanted to do a tag that has been circulating around TarotTube a lot recently, which is hashtag shoppingfortarot, and it originated with a Lady Knight of Avalon. So yes, shopping for tarot, a thing that I've done way too much this year. I don't even want to think. Oh god, I have not like actually added up how much money I've spent on tarot decks, because I'm certain this is the most expensive hobby I've ever had, and I'm certain I would feel very ashamed if I knew the number. But you know what? I like my decks, so it's fine. Alright, let's get into it. First question: what is the last deck you bought and why that one? So the last deck that I purchased, as opposed to the last deck that showed up, but the last deck that I purchased is actually, I just backed the Brady Tarot, the second edition. So I've been kind of sitting on that one. I wasn't like particularly interested in it until I heard Catherine of Hypatia Tarot kind of gushing about it, and I had saved her review to watch, because when I saw there was a Kickstarter, and I was like, like maybe, I don't know. I know a lot of people like this one, and I had been sort of on the fence because two things about the deck. One is it's very based in Native North American traditions, and then number two, it is very based in North American animals. And I feel like I don't have, like, because I am not Native and not somebody who is super familiar with animals in general, I was sort of on the fence about it, because I feel like a lot of times with decks that are themed around something I'm not familiar with, it's like, well, I could learn, like, it could be a useful learning tool, but then at the same time, like, it's not, it's like a stretch deck. Like, it's not something that's necessarily, it's also not something that's really, like, mine, and so it feels a little like, well, I could learn about the thing, but, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, point being, so I ended up watching Catherine's review, and decided to go ahead and pull the plug on the Brady Tarot, because I think I really like the detail in it, and some of the like cool, like little like moments of like humor or just interesting nuance, and I'm like, yeah, you know, I've been wanting to have wanting to connect more with pictures in decks, with imagery, not just being like, it's the Three of Wands, so here's what the Three of Wands is. I have a bad habit of that, and I think maybe the Brady Tarot might actually like unlock a little more of the focusing on the imagery, both because of the imagery itself and because it doesn't say what the suit is in the image, and the suits are different, and I have a feeling it's going to be hard for me to actually know which card it is, so maybe that'll just make me focus on the image. That was a long explanation. Okay, so two, what is your decision process when you buy a new deck? Clearly it's not long enough, given the number I have. No, I mean, generally, so I have a spreadsheet, surprise, and you can actually see I have a video, a tour of my spreadsheet, and one of the tabs in there is decks. So I have a bunch of different categories. Whenever I come across a deck, usually through YouTube or some other sort of Instagram or something, I see that there's a deck out there, my process is to throw it in there, and then categorize it from anywhere from would take, meaning like I probably wouldn't even pay money for it, but I'm kind of interested, but would like, um, which is kind of the lowest of like I'd buy it if it's really on sale, to want, and then there's priority future is like the next to highest category, and then definitely want is like buy the thing soon, and then buy it ASAP, which is usually out of print stuff. If I see it, I'll snap it up. So that, in theory, I should be following that, right? Like, in theory, if I decide to buy something, I should start from the top. In reality, I do that, but also I honestly just have whims sometimes. Kickstarter, I'm bad about just being like, I wonder what's on Kickstarter. Ooh, I'll back this. So yeah, it's not that much of a decision process. In terms of like how I decide whether I want something though, I mean, it's really about, how much the deck resonates with me. Does it have a great representation? Do I like the aesthetic? Does it, certain things about the deck that I like borderless decks I like, things without keywords I like, certain things like that. But really it's down to the aesthetic. Is it something that just jumps out at me that I really would like to read with? And to some extent also, how likely do I think it is to go out of print? Because of my traumatic experience with the slow hauler, I have probably a little bit of FOMO and maybe overbuy indie decks because I'm afraid they'll go out of print. Okay, number 3. So sort of related, what are the deal breakers in a deck that keep you from buying it? I mean, the first thing that jumped into my mind when I saw this question is any kind of, racist imagery, any kind of appropriation, and like in particular, so I'm unlikely to want to buy decks that focus on a specific community if the deck creator is not of that community. Sometimes it's hard to find out, particularly with like native imagery, what the deck creator's background is. But I'm particularly wary of. So it's not necessarily a total deal breaker if somebody's not from a community, but if they don't have familiarity, haven't worked with that community. So things that are red flags are like if there's sort of random imagery that is like from all different native nations, and then it's just sort of like this is a native deck, because that's sort of similar to being like this is an African thing. I mean, if it is intentionally like this is representing different traditions, and that like it says that in the literature, like the guidebook is specific, like this is Anishinaabe, this is, whatever, this is Diné, but like, if it seems like the creator is just kind of like, this is native stuff, it doesn't really know what they're talking about, then that's going to be definitely a deal breaker. I would say maybe not 100% a deal breaker, but like a heavy turnoff would also be just if there's people, if they're like all skinny white, like the same people, that's close to a deal breaker. I don't know if there are any other people have talked about like specific things like borders and keywords. Those aren't necessarily 100% deal breakers for me, but I would say that they're kind of turn-offs. So, I don't really buy full-on Marseille decks. I am less inclined to buy decks that have keywords, but it's not a no for me. One thing that actually is a deal breaker is like a really shitty font. If I hate the font just like takes away from the imagery. It's always really unfortunate because there's a couple of decks I've really wanted and just been like I can't with the font. And and I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I would say I'm generally just not that interested in things that are basically like medieval Europe or like kind of Renaissance Europe. Just not really into. Number 4, Little White Book or Big Guidebook. Big Guidebook, even though I fail to read them. I always want there to be one that I can dig into when I have time. Number 5, do you have new deck rituals? How do you break in a new deck? I do a deck interview. I don't actually look at so kind of like an anti-ritual, but I specifically don't look at the cards before I start reading with them. At least until I've done a deck interview and then like read with it a little bit, and then maybe after that I might want to like look at every card. But I know some people like to like look at every card and get familiar, and I prefer to kind of meet the cards through readings. But really the interview is the only ritual I have. So 6, have you ever been disappointed after getting a deck because it looked or felt different than expected? Bonus question, have you ever been pleasantly surprised by a deck after getting it? Yeah, I would say there have been decks where like I didn't look at the imagery enough. So the biggest one that jumps out to me was the Goliath Tarot that I bought having seen some of the imagery and didn't realize that there was some of that sort of like what feels to me like careless use of native imagery in it. There's also a few that it was just like I mean, there's some I took a gamble on. Like, I think I'm not sure whether I'm going to keep the Wayfarer's Tarot, and I got that, and I wasn't sure when I bought it either, so, like, that's not really a big difference between the images and what I saw. The Ostara Tarot I haven't really connected with yet. I expected it to be a little more of an immediate connection, and it hasn't been, but I'm still giving it a chance. Yeah, those are the ones that pop into mind. And then as far as the bonus question, pleasantly surprised. Yeah, absolutely. The Spirit Speak is one that I connected to way more than I necessarily initially expected to. What else? I feel like there are others, but they're not jumping to mind. I think maybe the Dark Days. I feel like I was excited about it, but I didn't know how much I was going to connect to it. 7, do you interview new decks? Yeah, yes, as I said. I used the spread on Little Red Tarot with like one slight adjustment, which I, for the life of me, can't remember what the original was, so I can't really tell you the adjustment, but the first question I do a little differently. 8, do you ever buy decks for a specific purpose, only using it for that one? I think there have been decks where I've particularly thought this would be good for shadow work, so like I wasn't necessarily like 100% in love with the deck, but I thought, oh, this could be good for shadow work. I got the herb, is it called the Herb Crafters? Yeah, the Herb Crafters Tarot specifically because like I wanted to learn more about plants. So I've gotten some for like, oh, I want to connect more to this thing. Also some animal decks because I wanted to connect more to the animals. But that's the only thing like that I can think of. Number 9, do you differentiate between decks you buy for yourself and decks you would use for others? So, because I mostly read for myself, like every deck is for myself. Like I wouldn't buy a deck just for others. But as far as the other way around, there are decks that not that I wouldn't ever, like if somebody said I know you have this deck and I want a reading with it, then sure. But like, because I typically don't read often for others, when I do, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm gonna read for others. Like these are the decks I'm bringing. I tend to stay away from ones that are like super abstract that I think people maybe wouldn't necessarily connect to. If I'm gonna be like, particularly sometimes for work stuff, I'll just bring some decks and offer tarot readings. I tend to, if it's something like that where I just want to have some decks on hand, I'll tend to bring ones that I think will appeal to a large, like, number of people, so I don't necessarily bring really specific stuff, like a deck that I think you'd have to have like a specific interest, like the Steven Universe, the Future Vision Gem Tarot, or like I think Dust to Onyx is great for reading for Black queerance, but like if it's gonna be a mixed audience, like I won't necessarily bring that if I don't know who's there. And I won't travel with really expensive decks. That's another thing, or like out of print decks. So I would read for people with them, but only virtually. And finally, 10. What is one thing you wish deck creators would do more of, or stop doing? One thing. There's a few things. I mean, I think every deck is its own thing. So, okay, here's one thing that, like, fairly universally I wish were true. That do away with tuck boxes. What I really like is a small box that I can keep in my shelf so I don't have to buy a bag for it, but I understand sometimes the larger boxes are nice to have because you need the guidebook in there, so that's fine. But I don't understand, like a small tuck box, it's not useful, it's gonna fall apart. So I understand it does make the deck cheaper and more accessible. So, okay, fair, but like, I think the prices of lidded boxes have come down enough that at least for like a not super fancy one is probably comparable. So that's what I'll say. So there you go. You can feel free to leave comments below. If you have thoughts about these, do your own VR with the hashtag shoppingfortarot. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy tarot content.